Welcome to the Valley Podcast, episode number 11. Today, my guest is a former college infielder, a New York Times bestseller, ESPN analyst, contributor, producer. He's also a contributor on the Baseball Tonight podcast, often weekly, I believe, and old college teammate of mine. So I'm really excited to have Paul with us today, man. Thank you for being here.
Dave, it is a pleasure. It is a delight. I could do this for something like 100 years. Talk baseball with her. Look, for those of us who know and love baseball, like it's like the kind of language that we just share, right? So like if you know ball and you encounter someone else that knows ball, you can do it forever. And baseball is the only sport like that for me. Like I work at ESPN, right? So I obviously cover any number of sports and enjoy them all to some degree. But baseball is the sport for which you can enjoy it the most ways. You can enjoy like the beauty and the aesthetic at it at a ballpark in the summer with a beer, or you can enjoy like the digging into the granular numbers and enjoy it that way too. And the more that you consume baseball, whether it be numerically, whether it be watching games, whether it be anything, the more you learn to enjoy it. It's like the kind of thing where like over the course of your life, you start liking it. By the time you're done, you love it. And you and I are both that way.
You know, it's funny you bring it up. That's not where I want to start, but I was having this conversation with John Madden the other day about the shortening of the game. What you just described is how I feel about, and I made some changes to make the game shorter, which I'm all for. It's fine. But it was never, for someone who likes baseball, it was never an issue, the length of it, because it was more of an experience going to the ballpark, getting a drink, having a hot dog, hanging out, talking with your buddy, track of the bat happens, you turn your head, you watch the game. Like it was an event more so than just like just a sporting event, I guess I would say. So like, what's your opinion on that?
Baseball's timelessness was not a bug. I thought it was a feature. Now, when you shorten the game the way that they have, when you insert the pitch clock, you do all these things to speed them up, to inject a little bit more offense. These are objective goods for the casual, right? You and I are casuals. You and I love baseball in any capacity, in any setting. I can go to a middle school baseball game and enjoy it. And that's going to take 3 hours as they're playing Ring Around the Rosie. Just like I can watching Game 5 of the World Series, right? That's what makes baseball great. Like in any setting, in any place, those of us who know and love it can enjoy it in any setting like that and enjoy it in any capacity like this. I mean, you and I will spend thousands of more hours in our life talking ball, not in front of a microphone, and I'll enjoy it just as much as I am for the next couple hours.
Yeah. Do you think, do the stats prove that it did increase viewership of the shortening of the game?
It does.
It does.
Major League Baseball has, I think, hit the jackpot with this stuff. I think obviously Rob Manfred, the commissioner, deserves a lot of credit because he listened to the feedback, the research that he was getting. Theo Epstein also deserves a lot of credit, who served in the commissioner's office for several years after leading the Cubs, because he recognized that he had kind of built this dragon that needed to be slayed. Like analytics had reached a place in baseball, Dave, as you well know, where it had become a lot less entertaining because of the preponderance of pitching changes and all of the things that were telling teams these are ways in which we could become more efficient, were ways in which it was making baseball less fun for the casual. Ultimately, baseball was meant to be enjoyed. It serves no other purpose. Truthfully, in the grand scheme of it, it's baseball. We're not talking about rocket science. We're not talking about foreign relations. We're not talking about politics or anything that actually matters. It's meant to be enjoyed. It serves no other purpose. And whatever we can do to ensure that the most people can enjoy it, we should. And that's what baseball has done.
Do you think there's any of these changes? Is there any changes coming down the line that you think are taking it too far?
No, because I'm in favor of the robo-umps. I think as the world changes, baseball needs to do the same. Let's use the NFL, for example, because they obviously are really good at making money, at bringing in viewership, at bringing in fans. What they learned a long time ago was these are our assets. These are our quarterbacks. We need to protect these billion-dollar entities. And so now you can't touch it, right? Now you'll see people complaining every Sunday that you can't touch the quarterback. But what the NFL has learned is those people we need on the field. We'll do whatever we can. We'll go to great lengths to ensure that those guys are staying on the field. Just like we'll go to great lengths to ensure that our wide receivers aren't getting held down the field because we weren't scoring. Because fantasy football is good. People like playing fantasy football and betting on offense and things of that nature. They understood that football, first and foremost, was an entertainment product. Baseball, fundamentally, is the same. Let's not allow the sacred nature of baseball's history dating back to the 1800s to get in the way of a modern consumption of it. We consume information and entertainment now so much differently than we did when Alexander Cartwright was laying down the the bases on the Elysian field, right? It's so different now. There's no reason we can't evolve. There are certain things that are sacrosanct. 90 feet between bases. 60 feet 6 inches, been in place since 1893. 3 up, 3 down, 4 balls, 3 strikes, etc. But there are many things that I'm open to changing, like in the future here soon, adding robo-umps to the equation of the challenge system, which I think also will be an objective good. We have the technology. Let's weaponize that technology.
You don't think it takes away at all from having the robo umpires? Like, are you saying like every umpire be a robo umpire?
No, I'm saying the challenge system.
So just the challenge system. Correct. Still have an umpire behind the plate.
Correct.
Okay.
That way you don't lose the interpersonal interplay. You don't lose the artistry of getting a half ball off the plate in the 7th inning when you're shut.
Would you say that is something that should never be changed?
I do. I think what's your fault?
Once we go to the robo umpire, isn't that the natural progression?
So there's
completely eliminate.
There's a slippery slope argument to everything like this, but we should not allow perfect to be the enemy of good. Might we someday reach a place where umpires are obsolete and these guys are playing games on a baseball field without anybody supervising them? Perhaps, and I would not be in favor of that. But what I want to avoid is the 3-2 pitch that's a ball and a half off the plate getting rung up, and all of a sudden, instead of the bases loaded with 2 outs, the inning's over, and that sabotages your rally. What we need to do is avoid the egregious miss. And the fact that the challenge system is in place, rather than just like a cast a wide net robo ump across the board, is because it creates that interplay that still exists between human beings, which I want, but it gets rid of the egregious miss, and also it'll demonstrate which these guys actually know the strike zone. Because what we learned in the minor leagues is about half the time, the umps get it right. One of the most incorrect assumptions right now, and this is backed up numerically, is that umps are worse now than they've ever been. Umps are better now than they've ever been. The correct call percentage every year increases from the last. From the time we first started measuring this 15 or 20 years ago, because these guys have analytics. They have the same measurements that players and coaches do, and they're adjusting their games accordingly. They're not going to get them all right, but if you get 92 or 93%, you're really good at that job. You're the best in the world at that job. But of course, Twitter and Instagram don't much care about the nuance behind that point whatsoever.
How long do you think it'll take before they go completely robo umpire? Like, and I'm saying eliminate the umpire, because I do think, I know it's a you say it's a possibility. I think it's a very high.
I think it's more probable than no.
100%.
And you'd be against it.
I would be against it.
I would too, at least on the surface.
Because like, why can't we put sensors in the base bats? Why can't we put a sensor in the baseball? Because like that's the kind of where the road ends up going.
You're worried about the same
in order to be in order to say, well, we want to get the call right.
Be too fine to be too.
We want to be the call right. Yeah, which is an argument to be made, but that again, that human element, which I still love. You know, I love to be able to tell a kid, hey, you got to swing earlier in a count, so you don't leave that last pitch up to the umpire. That ball that's a half of off the plate. I think that's part of, to me, that's the part of the nuance of the game that I love so much, and then it also, I feel like it's going to change. It changes the dynamic between the professional level and the youth level, because the youth level cannot do everything that the professional level is doing. Now, obviously, there's always going to be that gap at some level. But I think I like that young kid that's at the 10U field is playing the same game that Major League Baseball players are.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
You know what I mean?
Beautiful thing.
So yeah, I would be against that.
I'm with you. I'm gonna count myself definitively into the challenge system, and potentially even expanding it beyond whatever it winds up being 1, 2, 3 game as they've experimented in the minor leagues. What we know for sure based on the minor league data, because they've obviously done full robo-ump testing in Arizona Fall League and various minor leagues, is that it shrinks the strike zone considerably. And so these games are long, walk rates are a lot higher, and that's not good for the game either. Yeah. So
didn't they do that in the independent league too?
Yes.
That's the Atlantic League or whatever.
Full on road.
Right.
And from everyone that went to those games, watched it, out of them, it was an absolute slog. And it's like watching 11-year-olds play Ring Around the Rosie in a Little League game when the kid can't find a broth out of a barn.
Yeah, that's when he has to throw it in the middle. I had some buddies that were pitchers in that league, and they absolutely hated it, obviously, as well, because they were forced to throw it over the middle in order to get the strike call.
We don't want to
get a rock.
We don't want it. We don't want to go that far, but we want to test the technology so far to know how far we should go. And to as much of an extent as I can, I do trust Rob Manfred and the current group of people in Major League Baseball to get the big things right, because they have over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I will say I do, as much as I don't like where it maybe would end up, I do like the challenge as well. And I think what I like about it is if it adds an element of strategy, just like in the NFL it does, right? You only have so many of them. You got to pick and choose the right time to do them. At the end of the game, you may try to throw a Hail Mary, and maybe you get a good, you call over. If you have one left, you know what I mean?
What I want, Dave, in addition to this, and I'm telling you right now, this is not something people are saying aloud. They've not tested in the minor leagues, best I can tell, but I want it bad. I want the challenge system to apply also on safe outs. I want it to be player versus ump. So Javier Baez is sliding in the second base on a steal attempt. He'd get called out after he does one of those like signature swim moves of him, but he thinks he got in before the tag got him. Right. It needs to be Javi Baez in that moment, just like it is in the batter's box against the second base ump. Tap the helmet within 5 seconds, but it's not fair to have AJ Hinch on the top step looking back at the telephone where his video guy's talking to someone making $12.50 an hour to look at this stuff in granular detail in 30 seconds, and for it to be AJ Hinch from his video guy to Javi Baez against the umpire with the opportunity to see it. No. That's not fair. Right. The challenge system works at the plate because it's you versus me in this moment. It needs to be the same way on the base pass. Safe out needs to be challengeable on the base pass by the players in the moment without any assistance from the dive.
I like that. I like that.
It'd be really fun and very strategic too.
Yeah, because it's also like when you think of the looking back, like that's how they do in the NBA too, right? It's like they're constantly the row behind the coaches is like, should we challenge this? Should we challenge this? Let me know.
Keep it on the field.
Yeah.
This is the thing about baseball I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose the sanctity of the playing field. I don't want to lose the sanctity of what goes on that diamond. And once you got the video guys upstairs interfering with what's going on in the dugout during the game, when it comes to calls that are being made, that to me is like, we're taking things into the hands of people that they should not have a say in the matter. And this is coming from an analyst type. Like I've gone from player to numbers guy, and I'm a full-on numbers guy. But I don't want that responsibility. It's not a responsibility that I should have. That should be on the players, whether it be the infielder or the base runner, to decide at the moment, was I safer out than the umpire get it ready?
I like that. I think that's a good distinction. Speaking of a numbers guy, obviously you are, so analytics are a big part of what you do. Is there anything that analytics misses and when it comes to this is baseball, obviously specifically, that or like it just can't measure over the course of a game that's impactful?
Yeah, the impact of a manager. I think managers in baseball have gone from being overvalued, overrated 15, 20 years ago to exceedingly undervalued and underrated in today's game. And I'll tell you why. It is very easy now to assume that there are 30 managers across baseball that are effectively front office puppets. And that's because many of them candidly are. They're not filling out the lineup card that they necessarily would choose or would want to. That is being, if not directed from the front office, very much recommended by the front office, using their run expectancy matrices to determine where everyone should go to maximize run scoring for that night. And things like that. Those kinds of pre-game decisions are largely being taken out of the manager's hands. So many of these managers now, Dave Roberts, Kevin Cash, Aaron Boone, who have been in their current spots for many years, have a very symbiotic relationship with their front offices because they recognize that these guys, we have an entire army of people upstairs who can maximize our chances to win night to night when they run these numbers. And these numbers are not unassailable, but you're dealing in probabilities. And if you can increase your average run scoring output on average on your simulator from 4.6 a night to 4.8 a night, you should flip the lineup around, because over 162, you might eke out another win or two because of it. But what those guys can't measure, of course, is are players hitting their 40th percentile outcomes in a season, their 60th, their 80th. And look, you play baseball, college ball with me. It is exceedingly obvious to players that being comfortable, being happy, feeling appreciated, like you're all rowing in the same direction, maximizes your potential. And the way in which that happens is by creating a work environment for people to succeed. It's no different than in any walk of life, whether you were for Apple or Amazon or the local trash company. It doesn't matter. How can I maximize what I'm doing? How can I be as good as I could possibly be? And a lot of that is environmental. A lot of that is creating an environment in the clubhouse, in the case of a manager, that players feel value, that players feel like this is the role that I best occupy, and I'm going to fill this role as adeptly as I can because I know that guy has my back. That's not something that analytics can measure. And so when you see a manager fired mid-season, when you see a manager fired after the season because he wants an extra $500,000, it's not the kind of thing that analytics can point to and say, this guy has a lot more qualitative value, because we've lost the qualitative. We're very good at the quantitative because anybody can point to a screen and say, this is what my spreadsheet says. But can you ask 40 players to see whether or not they think they got more out of their potential this year than they otherwise would? Because that's what makes a manager great, is if you're getting a bunch of guys that are outperforming their median outcome. And if you do that, your team's going to win more games than it should. And over the course of a season or several seasons, you're adding several wins to that manager's ledger that a replacement level manager per se would not have been able to fulfill.
Where do you think front offices value that equally as they value being able a manager that is willing to go along with the analytics, data, and being able to coach along that way. Because there's a lot of old school managers that refuse to do that,
Right.
and they're not really in the league anymore, or very few, I should say. So I mean, how much value is in what you just described, which I agree with?
Very little.
Very little.
There's very little value that is ascribed to that, and I don't think that is correct or fair. But you have to keep in mind, I would say something like 90+% of analyst types in front offices are guys that don't have big league experience. These are people with backgrounds like mine or backgrounds like others who are math-oriented, not communication-oriented necessarily. And it's hard to place value, capital V value, on something that cannot be proven or unproven. And so when you're taking players' word for, oh, I like playing for this guy, or I don't like playing for this guy, that's much less impactful than this guy disregards my lineup, projections, and thus let's choose someone who's going to be a puppet of our front office because we think that we're going to outscore the opponent more often than not if he does it my way. But we have to keep in mind, like, how well is that guy playing anyway? If that guy's not playing great, then that might be in large part because of the way that he feels on a day-to-day basis in the clubhouse, or the treatment that he's getting, or the way that he's managed throughout the course of a season. And these are all things that they're all variables, and they're no constants. And for people that run the numbers, those are break your brain type conversations that only baseball people that have actually been through the ringer can credibly have. And I say that as someone, again, who is a numbers-oriented person. But one of the things I've learned about numbers, the more that I run these, is that they're not as impactful. They're not as weaponizing as I originally thought. In fact, the more you learn about the data, the more you do the analysis, the more you realize their shortcomings.
What do you think the pendulum will ever swing back?
Probably not. And the reason for it is because when you think of any innovation, find me one example in which we have cracked the code and done something innovative and decided we've gone too far. We can't just drive cars. We have to drive them they have to drive us by themselves now. Think about any number of things. We can't just have a smartphone. We need one that can do everything. I need a computer in my hand. Any innovation that you conceive in life, let's not just go to the moon, let's go to Mars, right? Always goes to the umpteenth degree. It's always the smartest people in the room that wind up winning the conversations. They're the ones that are the most persuasive. And the higher floor you're on, typically, the more say that you'll have. The manager's on the ground floor. He's on the field. He has much less power than the guys that are sitting in the 300 level suites with the iPads. Yeah. And so the way in which things are trending, every team is hiring more and more R&D guys, research and development guys, and fewer scouts. And so this is not even something for which I need to interject an opinion, because teams are telling us themselves, we are swinging the pendulum too far.
Yeah. The one, I guess, maybe hope that I would have is that it's a sport. It's different than, society. The sport in itself is driven by performance and success, right? So if you can have success, if it's proven after, if you experiment with a coach like that has the clubhouse, and that team is having success because of that coach having the clubhouse, and there's evidence of that, there's potential that could become a factor moving forward, potentially.
Yeah, that's
just similar to, like, when launch angle came in, and that was like a big thing. Yeah, everyone was pushing that, and obviously it's still to some degree, but that pendulum has swung back a little bit. Not as much as some would like, but it has.
Let's unpack that. I'm fascinated by this topic.
Yeah.
The notion of maximizing or optimizing rather your launch angle, your pull air percentage, things of that nature, right? There is an entire army of internet GMs now who believe that Anthony Volpe should swing the baseball bat the same way that Junior Caminero swings the baseball bat, the same way that Yordan Alvarez should swing the baseball bat, the same way that Tyler Soderstrom should swing the baseball bat, and so on and so forth. Nothing could be further from the truth. The genius, the genius of hitting is that no two hitters are the same. The genius of hitting is that in an extremely finite period of time, 0.4 of a second, with all the mechanical nuance that goes into each and every swing, it spits the Statcast data spit out terabytes of data. And the notion that you can just look at someone's baseball savant page and say, should be doing more of this and less of this without peeling back the onion several layers is candidly as offensive to my sensibilities, because That's not in any way true. How much pull side power do you actually have? Do you really want to have a high air pull percentage if you're fringy pull side power? Of course not. How much contact are you losing? Are you forfeiting if you want to catch the ball 2 inches further out front? Well, in many cases, a lot more than you actually want to. In the case of every single hitter, their swing, their bat path, their attack angle, even their bat speed, their launch angle, all the attributes that we sort of boil in a pot together should be different for everyone based on that optimization. Sure, there are certain hitters, like Isaac Paredes is a good example. He can only catch the ball out front and pull it for home runs, and so his air pull percentage should be really high. Anthony Volpe, on the other hand, it's fairly clear, should be driving the baseball to the right center field gap and running for days. Whereas so many analysts believe that, no, the latter should be hitting just like the former. Dave, and I hate that. Look, you're a hitting guy and have been a really good one for a long time, and you probably see this at the youth levels too. You see these kids trying to jack home runs at the age of 11 when, they're backspinning a baseball and the outfielder's coming in, patting his glove twice and catching it, right? Like, that's not what we want. We want a hitter to have the malleability to understand that optimization for me is different than optimization for they.
Yeah.
And I find that maddening because the ideal launch angle for so-and-so is very different than the ideal launch angle for so-and-so. And those conversations are much too had in the abstract and not nearly often enough had very specifically based upon individual hitter strengths and weaknesses.
I could not agree any more than that. That's.
Do you see that at the unit levels too?
So this is what my question for you is: when you're dealing with big leaguers, it's easier to know what their strengths and their weaknesses are, what you can optimize more than they know the type of hitters. They're at the big league level. They know if it's gotten them there. At a youth level, at what age do you know? So a young kid starting out hitting, they has to start with some mechanics. He's got to start with something. What should be the importance at the youth level when he doesn't even know what type of hitter he is yet, right? He doesn't know if he's a pull side, if he's better living in the gap. How does he, direct, or her, honestly, in the softball world too,
sure,
what direction they want to take their swing?
I've always felt that we over-index upper body and under-index lower body when it comes to hitting. So you just show me what's going on below the tip of the iceberg for most hitters. If you just show me their waist out, I could tell you if they're a good hitter or not, and you could probably do the same. And what young hitters need to be doing is building their swing from the ground up, from their back ankle to their back knee to their back hip to their back elbow. And so often hitters are only looking at their hands. The hands are the symptom. The hands are not what's driving the driving force of the swing. What your hands are doing is a byproduct of all the legwork that is occurring to get yourself up and down that kinetic chain. And so, to answer your question directly, you don't know when you're 12 years old, if you're going to be a pull side bomber or a punch and Judy to the opposite field necessarily. But there are certain things fundamentally that you have to get right from the perspective of your lower body. And if you have those things right, as you age, you're going to have the malleability to pull side launch, or in a 2-strike count, hit a line drive over the second baseman's head, because you're going to have the fundamentals in place, and then you'll be able to then control your barrel because the stuff going on beneath the tip of the iceberg is sound. But you typically watch a young hitter swing, the thing they're caring about is all this, right? This, whatever, but those things can't be perfect. They can't be right. They can't be true, and they can't be flexible over time if you have a really, really solid lower half.
Yeah, I agree with that. On the big league level, how much of the coaching staff or the analytics side is trying to put hitters in the same box versus just the public saying it? You know what I'm saying? Is it actually coming from organizations, or is it more so just you hear on Twitter and it's just the chatter from the stands?
That's a fascinating question. So I think that on balance, big league hitters now have enough access to information, especially if they want it, to be able to, within some degree of reason, maximize their output, their success. And you probably heard stories about some of these big league hitters kind of eschewing what the team is providing them and hiring their own analysts. Pitchers are doing that too. And that's not even all that uncommon or even frowned upon anymore. What is these guys to be great? Now, if you're an R&D guy for the Mets and Pete Alonso gets his own hitting coach, you might feel compromised in some sense. But ultimately what matters is that Pete Alonso mashes. And if he wants to pay someone to ensure that he's mashing and to provide another set of eyes, then that's something he should do. And candidly, I think it's a thing that a lot more players should do, because the things that you see on Twitter, for as elementary and reductive as they are a lot of the same things that you probably see and hear from front office types. Again, the lack of nuance and the resorting to X equals Y or causation correlation when, again, there are so many variables and so few constants. And when you're dealing with hundreds of hitters in an organization, you don't have the bandwidth to actually ensure that everyone has their personalized program down pat necessarily, even though teams might try. But players that have it within their means to outsource, for lack of a better term, that stuff, and to get another voice in their ear with someone that doesn't have to see hundreds of thousands of other people's swings, that's not such a bad strategy to employ. It's the kind of thing that I think you'll see a lot more people do, because over the course of time, even though they are obviously employed by the team, in some sense, you're an independent contractor when you're in that lineup. You come up 1 time out of night, and you want to maximize your output to maximize your career. If I'm going to pay someone $500,000 a year to make sure that my swing's perfect each and every time and talk to you after every game, well, so be it.
How important do you think hitting coaches, even if the personal ones, are to these guys?
Exceedingly, because over the course of 162 games, 600 plate appearances, it's an absolute slog. And you don't necessarily feel the same way day to day. And every pitcher in an organization has a terabyte of information on how to get you out based upon your swing and your approach and your everything, right? So it's much easier to isolate from the perspective of pitching how exactly I should attack this hitter in this moment, because that information is a lot more controllable. I'm the one that's creating the reaction. I'm the one that's dictating the terms. When you're a hitter, you are reacting exclusively to the terms that the pitcher is dictating. And so over the course of 162 games, I'm operating at an enormous informational disadvantage because I got the entire team over there figuring out how to get me out based upon all of my weaknesses. Whereas I am one of many hitters in this organization who has, you know, probably a fairly standardized approach, but it's super important for me to ensure that I'm getting the same kind of individual treatment and attention as every pitcher that they're bringing out of their bullpen that's throwing 100 that knows exactly what my biggest weaknesses are.
So how much of hitting do you think now with all the data is just guess hitting?
A lot of it. But I also think there's a lot of anticipatory hitting. So
I guess that's what I mean by that.
Sure, of course. Bryce Harper's a good example. So you go to Bryce Harper's baseball savant page. You'll see 10th percentile in chase, 10th percentile in whiff. And that, I think, is by design. Bryce Harper's selectively guessing. He is, in leverage counts, picking quadrants and pitch types and swinging for that quadrant and pitch type. And if he swings over it or he swings under it, he'll live to see another day. All of a sudden, it'll be 2-1. You know, he's not doing that with 2 strikes. But the best hitters in baseball, Ted Williams wrote The Science of Hitting, which I read many, many years ago. The best hitter that ever lived, right? He guessed. He openly admitted to guessing. That's what he did. Ted Williams guessed. So if Ted Williams, as great as he was humble enough to guess, you should be too. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't go in with a very concise plan as to what this guy might try to do to get me out, of course. But you might go into an at-bat and say, I'm going to ambush a first pitch fastball, but only if it's at a place where I can extend my arms and pull it. Strike 1. It was a fastball in. All right. 0-1 pitch. What am I doing in this at-bat here? So I know he likes going to his breaking ball. He's probably going to start this pitch at my knee. And if I see spin and it starts there, it's going to break below the zone. He does it. 1-1. Let's reset now. That's the warfare that occurs in every hitter's brain on every single pitch, of course. But you can't successfully be a big league hitter against this kind of stuff if you're not anticipating. Not just in terms of like what pitch are they throwing and what count and perhaps at what location, but is he doing anything in his glove? Is he doing anything with his body language to demonstrate that he might be tipping tonight? What if there's a scenario in which I, over the course of my first at-bat, recognized that he was doing something odd in his glove when he was going to his breaking ball? I'm going to make sure that I tell all my teammates about that, in addition to the fact that, oh, by the way, he's throwing 97 and it's running a foot. So clear your hips a little bit early if you're going to guess fastball, right? Yeah. These are all data points that obviously matter a great deal. It's the beauty of baseball. That's an ultimate cat and mouse game. And you recognize that when you're on the field. But it's also more than happy if you find to watch if you're in section 420, just housing a hot dog, because you could be ignorant to that, all that, and enjoy it just as much.
Yeah. It was funny because we were talking about Miggy before we came online. And, you know, there's that great clip of Miggy. I can't remember who he was facing, but he basically, he knew the guy was coming inside with the fastball, and he just stepped to the bucket and he hanged through over the fence. Like you could see him change where he stepped in anticipation of the location and the pitch that he thought was coming.
Filled it.
And he got it right, and he didn't miss it.
Best hitters in baseball right now, we've got themselves an A swing, a B swing, and a C swing. Your A swing is, I'm in count leverage, I want to hit a ball pulse high 450 feet. And if I swing and miss because I guess wrong, either pitch, location, or type, I can live with it. My B swing is my 1 strike swing. This is where I'm going to try and split a gap, right? This is my take a pitch that might be not a pitcher's pitch necessarily, but this is not necessarily in my nitro zone, and it's not necessarily a fastball. but I can see it well out of the hand, and I'm going to split a gap with it. And then there's your C swing, your 2-strike swing, when the objective there is to hit a ball, a low line drive, right? And there are so few hitters in baseball that can actually fulfill that prophecy right now because pitching is so good. But you're seeing more and more now with the implementation of bat speed and the way that we can measure that more specifically, certain hitters in certain counts swinging the bat demonstrably slower on purpose. So Juan Soto, for example, one of the best hitters in baseball, one of the greatest left-handed hitters that ever lived, you'll see him take very different hacks with 2 strikes than he does in a 2-0 count, and that's on purpose. Because why would I swing as fast as I possibly can in any scenario when every scenario is different? Like an at-bat is its individual canvas. It's an art. And so I might go up there and hit a bomb on the first pitch, but it also might be an 11-pitch war. And by the time that the canvas is filled out, if I've done the very best I can to ensure that it's beautiful, and I do that 162 times a year, that's when my skill set is going to be maximized, right? But in order to do that, you can have a homogeneous approach to hitting. You can't swing 3-1 the same way that you do 1-2. You can be one of those, sell out for power guys, and you'll never maximize your slash line doing it that way. You might, run into 35 bombs in a given season, and that might be what your R&D department wants. But if you're looking to maximize your career, you're looking to maximize that at bat in that moment, given, base occupancy or who might be facing in that given moment, you need an A swing, a B swing, and a C swing. And I think you'll start to see people over-index there. Whereas I think for a lot of the last, we'll call it 10 to 15 years with the launch angle craze that you mentioned, let me just see if I can hit a bomb with 2 strikes no matter what. And that's when you're going to strike out 200 times a year. Kyle Schwarber's another good example. He's a Phillies player who this season, all of a sudden, cutting out of the strikeouts, staying close against lefties. It's an approach that's really worked well for him because the data tells you you're overdoing. You're giving away too many at bats.
So wasn't it the data that got us to that swing for the fences with 2 strikes? Wasn't that the data that told the guys to do that it was more beneficial? It was okay that you had strike out so many times because the times that you're going to hit the home run, it for whatever. Wasn't the data the one that forced that?
Very much so. So what the math is telling you here is that it's going to be very difficult for us to string 3 singles together against someone that's throwing 97.
Right.
And so what we need to do is aim to hit home run every plate appearance at every count. And if we do that enough times over the course of the season, we're probably going to score more runs than we would be trying to string them together, because stringing them together is so challenging. But that is at a time in which all we really had were the very rudimentary StatCast tools that we have now exploded from. So now we can measure the attack angle on every swing, the bat speed on every swing, the ideal tap on every swing, and these kinds of things that tell us, well, maybe we took that too far. Maybe we're doing too simple of an equation. There was an old British economist that once said, like, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? And you're seeing a lot of hitters change their minds now accordingly because they recognize they were taking it too far at the beginning. It doesn't necessarily mean that the math was wrong at the time. It does mean that the math has since changed since we've gotten a lot more of it.
Right. I they always say, stats never lie, liars use stats. All right? It depends on how you use it. It's amazing. But, so the pendulum can swing.
Pendulum can swing.
It can swing back.
More information equals smarter. So the way that we ensure that the pendulum properly swings is by not weaponizing the information, allowing the inputs to inform optimal conclusions and reaching those, rather than, oh, hit ball high and far, good. Swing like that with 2 strikes. Right. That's that.
Yeah.
Count me out.
So can the pendulum swing back on bunting?
On bunting?
Yes. An incorporation of bunting in the game or squeeze play.
So off the top of my head, last year across Major League Baseball, there was something like 2,500 bunt attempts. And I want to say something like 50 years before that, there were 2.5 times as many. So, like, if you're looking at the line graph, right, that's a pretty obvious trend. What the numbers say about bunting are, well, 2 things specifically that contradict each other. The first of which is using the run expectancy matrix. There's only one really good time to actually lay down the bunt, and it's with a runner on first and second with nobody out. However, if you look at just the run value itself of what happens when we bunt, more often than not, those values add up positively, more than you might expect. And the reason why that's the case is because of the double play ball. Staying out of the double play avoidance is one of the most underrated skills in all of baseball. This is something that no one discusses because it's not sexy, it's not interesting, it's not even all that obvious. But if you're someone who consistently catches barrels and hits the ball into the ground with a runner on first base, you're hurting your team immensely over the course of 162 games. It's a major problem in today's game. The problem is I don't know exactly how many guys can actually successfully bunt. So, and part of the reason why people aren't bunting as much as they had been 10, 15, 12 years ago is because the run expectancy matrix that we had tells us we were wasting outs, right? But there's also a reason that we're not doing it as much. And that reason is because I don't practice it as much and thus aren't as good at it. So if you're going to do it and it's unsuccessful, it's a double whammy.
Right.
I've given away out and a plate appearance. And I've not advanced the runner. My opinion is that there is a marked inefficiency if you're going to have an entire team of buy-in that say, we're going to bunt in advantageous situations to score one run rather than go for multiple runs, which is one of the reasons why we don't want to give away an out, and stay out of the double play ball. Staying out of the double play ball, to me, is a virtue that needs to be chased more. The best defenses in baseball can turn up. The worst ones can. The best hitters in baseball avoid double plays. The worst ones can't. It's a huge part of baseball. So what you need to do, if you're a team and you want to pursue this virtue, is run the numbers that say, to what extent are our chances to score one run versus multiple when we lay down a bunt? And what percentage of these bunts are successful on the line? Because nothing's worse than unsuccessfully laying down a bunt. You don't want Soto to bunt with a runner on first base. Juan Soto has granted like 15 double plays this year, though. Think about how many runs he's left on the board by doing that. Junior Caminero, one of the best young hitters in baseball. I think he's a rocket to the moon. Like 800 OPS at the age of 22. He's going to ground in 40 double plays this year. He's going to cost his team like a full win by grounding it to double plays this year. If he had laid down a bunt once a week instead of swinging at those pitches, he'd be a more additive player.
Why not steal in those instead of trying to bunt or swing?
It's all circumstantial, obviously. I think right now the stolen base is being a tad bit underutilized too. It requires buy-in from the players.
Yeah.
What
is I mean the percentage? What is the success rate on stealing a base?
It's low 80s right now, which is really good. The break-even point's in the mid to high 70s.
Incredible.
You need buy-in though. So here's the thing. Everything in life, as you well know, Dave, is all about incentives, right? What's going to get me paid, right? So in the NBA, there's no incentive not to load manage, so I'm going to load manage. And that's why none of their superstars play, and that's why they have such a big problem with getting their best players on the floor. And when they do, they get injured because it's this vicious cycle, right? So this is an example of incentives not working. In Major League Baseball, we don't pay for stolen bases. We don't pay for bunts. So why am I going to adhere to your run expectancy matrix? Why am I going to adhere to your run value study when I'm not going to get the contract I want, be rewarded the way that I'd like to, by doing this thing that you're telling me is going to help the team win, but I'm not going to get any credit for it? That's selfish. It's also how we operate as a world. Juan Soto's got a $765 million contract. He's not going to bunt once. I mean, aside from the occasional laying one down because someone's, playing him up the middle, right? That's not what we pay for. We don't pay for stolen bases either. Ronald Acuna stole like 70 bases in a season, and it added very little win probability, to be honest with you. And so if you want players to run, if you want players to bunt, I mean, it's as simple as you got to pay them to do it. You got to reward them financially to do it.
What's the data on squeeze plays? And your opinion on the squeeze play. So obviously we talk about bunting, moving guys over, limited double play, but the squeeze play, because my personal, I love the squeeze play.
It's one of my favorite plays in baseball.
And I think there's an element of the squeeze play. My argument for the squeeze play is, one, I was looking up just some of the data, and like they don't do it very often, to be least. So it's kind of difficult to even get the data on it.
It's a fairly small sample size. Yeah, Bardians and Brewers both get very well.
And so, but on the data they had, I mean, they did a study and it was like 70. So in tie games in the seventh inning or later, because that's really when they would do the squeeze plays.
Mm-hmm.
For the teams that did the squeeze play, they won 74% of the time versus the teams that didn't was like 54%. So it was like a 20% difference. It's specifically, I think it's just better. Yeah, very big, right? You know, and then also my thing is too, with the strikeout rate being so high, with a man on third and less than 2 outs, the strikeout rate is like 22% with a man on third and less than 2 outs. So if we can get one run and we can eliminate that 22%, which a strikeout obviously gets us nothing, in those moments. And then the one other element that I've always been a fan of a squeeze play is the thing that you can't quantify is momentum. Getting a squeeze play down and scoring out a squeeze play is an energy spark that you can't put a number on.
It juices up every dugout there's ever been.
It's more juice than hitting a sac fly. Right? If he
Just I think a grand slam.
you know what I mean? And often, in my opinion, and this is at the younger level, so I used to do a squeeze by a lot of the younger level, so it's probably different at the big level, but is that they generally don't even get the guy at first at the younger level. It's the only way true, right? It's so chaotic, and they would try it, and I always did a suicide. We went all in on that. We just went for it. We practiced a lot though, and so a lot of times they'd attempt to get the guy at home, and they wouldn't get him. And then by that time, it's too late to get the guy at first. Now you have a guy at first, and then a score to run. Everyone's going nuts because it's such a chaotic play. And talk about momentum shift, and if you're in a tie ball game, it's over. It's a wrap after that, essentially.
Yeah, that's a well-made point. I think it's probably another one of those conversations that goes back to what the numbers say. And I'm fearful that front offices view the squeeze, the suicide, as perhaps a little bit too risky. Just also from the perspective of, with all the moving parts, I'm not going to get someone hurt too. And that's something that if you're not practicing, if you're not perfected that art, if you've not done 100 of those reps in spring training, all it takes is one small thing to go wrong and that'd be pretty catastrophic, as you well know. What I think that teams should employ much more often is the count leverage button. So let's say run on third base, there's one out. We'll say Sal Frelick's on third base, Rhys Hoskins is up the plate. This is Brandon Brewer's example because they do it fairly well and fairly often. He goes up with a normal approach. I want to get this guy in. Strike one. In an 0-1 count, I want Rhys Hoskins bunted. In a 1-0 count, I want him swinging because I'm likelier in count leverage to be able to hit a ball to the moon and hit a 2-run home run. But if it's 0-1, if it's 1-1, if it's a count where I'm not as likely to get a meaty pitch, that's when you should bunt. So every at bat within the context of the count itself is this organism that you need to be malleable to. So the plan is, we see a first pitch meatball, I'm going to hit it out. If it's a first pitch strike, we're going to suicide on the next one. And if it's a first pitch ball, he's going to swing away again, based upon the profile of the pitch that you are likeliest to see. To me, that's a better way to approach a bunt situation, really in any sense, but especially the squeeze, than it is just at bat we're bunting or we're not bunting.
Yeah, I like that. What I love about that is, again, it goes back to the strategy of baseball, right? There's so much strategy within. I would even say from a youth level, I would do that opposite. You know why? Is because it's easier to bunt a fastball.
You'd like to see a fastball.
And I mean, you bunted in college. I mean, it's a lot easier to bunt a straight pitch than one that's breaking away from you.
That is a rainbow. Yes, that's absolutely the case.
So from a probability standpoint of getting the squeeze down and having success, I as a coach at a younger level, again, not the big level, hopefully these guys can bunt the wrinkle as well. You know what I mean? But at the younger level, it's like I want the kid, I want to bunt a fastball.
So in the big league level right now, we're only seeing fastball about 47% frequency. So a couple years ago, we dipped below 50 for the first time ever. And it's only going to go down from there because the numbers say that fastballs get hunted and it's the easiest pitch type to hit. You can't live without a fastball. But the fact that we're beneath 50% tells me that's the direction that we're going. If you're going to be able to live fastball the way that we used to, 55, 60, 65% of the time, you either need two of them or you need to be Paul Skeens, Garrett Crochet, Zach Wheeler, someone that can just hum it and sit there second and third time through the order. But there are so few people on earth that can do that right now.
Yeah. I think that pendulum will swing back, though. You do? I do. And this is why, because I think that's how hitters are taught. They're taught to hunt fastballs. If the rate of off-speed pitches is used that much more, like you're saying, it starts swinging down. Yeah, 60% is we're throwing off-speed pitches. Well, what are hitters going to do?
We're going to practice shapes all off.
They're not your off-speed pitches. You know what I mean? And then they'll have to swing back because now hitters are looking off-speed, and you'll have to be blowing fastballs by that.
Yeah, I mean, we know that faster equals better. Faster equals harder. The reason why fastballs are easier to hit is because they're easier to guess where they're going to meet your barrel because it's not going to behave oddly or differently. But I'd rather have the extra tick of reaction time. If I'm sitting on spin, that's a pitch that you see guys hit to the moon when they're sitting on it.
Yeah.
And so I think that you're probably right. What inflection point we reach is probably going to be something closer to the low 40s than the high 40s. But I'd love to be mistaken because there's nothing better than a perfectly placed fastball.
I gotta think it'll always fluctuate around the 50%.
You do?
I do. I think it will. It's just I think it'll drop down, I think, for sure for a while. But I think it'll tick back up because isn't that the perfect gambling game as a 50-50? Not knowing if it swings too far one way, then that educated guessing that we talk about becomes more successful. So you have to have that element of not knowing that 50-50 shot of a flip of a coin. Is he throwing an off-speed breaking pitch? Is he throwing a fastball? Because if I sit off-speed too much and this guy throws 3 fastballs, he's got me because I'll start too late.
You want it to be a flip of a non-weighted coin in any way.
Well, ideally, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, that's what you want. And I think if it gets too much on the one side, the other side can adjust and now can game plan for that.
Because you'll murder secondaries with the reaction time if you can.
And they'll just let fastballs go. We don't even swing them.
Because, I mean, right now, it's like some of the very best fastballs on earth are hard to touch, even if you know they're coming.
Correct.
Right now, the way that pitchers can live at the top of the zone with like 20 inches of induced vertical break is hard to square up, even if you know it's coming. But if I'm sitting on Garrett Crochet's changeup or breaking ball until I get to 2 strikes, then I have a chance. But if he's sitting at the top of the zone and that's a hole in my swing, right, you can tell me it's coming and I swing underneath it anyway.
Right. And then what he's going to do is eventually he's going to realize you're just sitting on off speed and then he's just going to start throwing fast. Hi. Hum. And that'll bring that percentage back to around probably 50%.
It's what makes baseball
viable. Yeah.
And there's that interplay in every single pitch in every single game across the sport.
What do you think about the analytics side of like pitchers, how managers use pitchers in different, areas? Starting pitchers used to go much longer, and now we have the middle guy, we have the 8th inning guy, and we have the closer. It's like, and it's all that. I mean, I even asked, I think, Turner Ward about it, and he didn't remember exactly, but the Dodgers, when they were kind of making their run in some of their years, and Dave Roberts made some calls. I think Hill was like throwing like a 1-hitter or a no-hitter or something at the time, and he pulled him in like the 7th inning just to get to the 7th, 8th, and 9th, those last 3 guys. Remember, I think they lost the game. I think they lost that game.
They lost that game just like the Rays lost the World Series game when they pulled Blake Snell.
So,
third time through the order.
Yeah, so like, what's your opinion of that? What does the data say about that?
The third time through the order penalty applies to most pitchers in baseball, but not all pitchers in baseball. The way in which you can successfully, if you're a pitcher listening to this, the way that you can successfully navigate the order for the 3rd time through, if you want to be a horse, there are dozens, if not hundreds of pitchers right now in baseball that can navigate the order twice through fairly successfully. A lot of those guys. There's like a dozen that can do it 3 times through successfully. And almost all of those guys have multiple fastballs and multiple breaking balls. You need a wide arsenal if you want to do it. You need a wide arsenal if you want to do it, because the more exposure that your, say, 3 pitches are subjected to, the likelier you're going to be ambushed the third time through the order, because they'll have seen the kitchen sink. So much of hitting, as you well know, Dave, is reacting to what you have already seen. So let's say, for example, you're facing Tarek Stubble. God bless your soul. So if you're facing Tarek Stubble, the first time through the order, let's say he strikes you out only using fastball changeup. That stinks because you've only seen half his arsenal. Second time through, he introduces a wrinkle. Third time through, you've seen it all. You have no idea what you're doing. But you're no better equipped to get to him that time through than you were the first time through, because the way that he's layered his pitches throughout your at-bats. But if you're a pitcher that only really has 3 pitches, and you have to use all of them to get me out the first time through, by the time I have so much exposure the 3rd time through, I absolutely am operating with the upper hand. That's why relievers come in, and they can only get through the order once, of course, because and at the best case scenario, they're going 3 pitches. Most of them are 2-pitch guys, and they don't have the stamina to be able to do it either. And so that's the biggest difference between all the different members of the assembly line, for lack of a better term. There are the horses, and those guys are disproportionately valuable. They're the 2 times through the order starters, and those are guys that can scratch $100 million contracts, but in many cases not quite get there. And then they're the opener types that can get you through once, and those are the guys that you have peppered throughout the bullpen. And they're all valuable in their own right, but there's the guys at the very top of the mountain right now in baseball that are exceptional because they have the multiple fastballs, the multiple breaking balls, and the ability to, over the course of a game, empty their kitchen sink and do so strategically so they can navigate the order for the 3rd time through.
Do you think managers and front offices are even allowing guys to see if they have that ability?
Not often enough. Not often enough, because in the minor leagues, they're so pitch count oriented that they don't have that testing ground anymore, as you well know. Some college programs allow their players to do it, but even that is becoming less and less common. And at the big leagues, in many cases, you're not coming up to the big leagues like Paul Skeens with 5+ pitches. So why would I let him face your cleanup hitter for the 3rd time through when I have someone throwing 99 with a fastball and a diabolical splitter in the bullpen that I can feel better about? How do I win that day? There's a win the battle versus win the war argument that analytics also can't quite see, because in the case of Rich Hill or Blake Snell in those scenarios that you use, over the course of those seasons, Blake Snell, we'll use him as the example since that happened in the World Series. And it was a very memorable pull. Blake Snell hardly did the thing that he would have needed to do in that moment. So we didn't really know how he would react to it. But because the Rays, in every start that season, were only interested in winning the battle, they didn't have the foresight to win the war. They didn't know if Blake Snell could do the thing. I think Blake Snell could have done the thing. But because they never tested it, they didn't practice to win the championship. They practiced to win the game. And in that case, it absolutely killed them.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem I have is that's where, when we go back to the manager side, as far as where I feel like a lot of that has been taken out of the feel, right? And because, you know, regardless of the amount of pitches that a guy has, sometimes a guy has his day, and whatever he's throwing is working against that line on that day. Now, it may not be next week. It may not work against them. 3 months from now, it may not work against them. But today, that's working.
Feel it in the moment.
I'm feeling it in the moment. And I feel like a lot of times now, we don't allow that guy to ride it out and have that day, because it's so much, oh, we got to that inning, boom, pull him, let's get to our 7th guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? And on the other side of it, too, we don't give the ability to, if someone is not feeling it, we're still putting that guy in that situation because that's where he's had success over the course of the year.
Sure.
And regardless of what he just did yesterday, maybe he didn't do well yesterday, we're still putting him back out there because this is the way it is. Like, and I think back of
works both ways.
It works both ways. Yeah, like, because the Guardians this past year with their closer,
Clase.
yeah, and unbelievable closer. I mean, this guy's
he's better than that
guy. Unbelievable, right? But again, this is from a fan perspective. I'm sure the data is going to disprove exactly what I'm saying. But to me, in that series, when they lost and he gave up a lot of those runs to his Judge, and, you know, obviously that had an unbelievable lineup that he had to face.
He got lit up pretty good with a Tiger.
He got lit up, and there was a confidence issue that was happening, you know. And as a pitcher, you understand that when you don't feel your stuff, it's just not maybe breaking this tight, or, you know, for some reason guys are on it.
Hitters are out for blood too.
Hitter hasn't in it much, and it's difficult. Now, I don't know what I've done, because he was the best closer in baseball that year, essentially. So, like, you know, how do you not roll him out there? But that sometimes the 8th inning guy would come out and dominate.
Yeah.
And like, you know, the fan side's like, why don't we just let that guy finish it out?
Sure.
And give him a break tonight. Let's have him reset instead of rolling him back out there in a 1-run game and you know, and then what happens. You know, I don't know what the right, but again, from the fan side of me, it's like, why don't we go with our gut?
Yeah.
A little bit here.
Yeah.
Instead of just, hey, he throws our 9th inning. He's our 9th inning guy.
So teams are really good at avoiding risks. They're not very good at managing them. Risk avoidance is very different than risk management. So it's easy to avoid the risk by saying the third time through the order, X, Y, or Z typically happens based upon the numbers that we run. It's much more difficult to manage what is in front of you based upon what is happening that day, whether it be with a starter or with Emmanuel Clase that day or the day before, right? Or what's happening in the 8th inning already. Because how many times have you seen a pitching change and immediately everyone in the other dugout finally gets the big eyes and says, oh, we can get to this guy.
Right.
Just because he was tired at 105 pitches doesn't necessarily mean taking him out now was the right move. But we have a 5-man pitching rotation in America. We should have a 6 or 7 one, in my opinion, because to me, pitchers should be throwing more pitches with more days of rest in between. Way they do it in college, way they do it in Japan. We're the only people that do it this way. We're the only 5-man rotation league that exists. It's not obvious to me why that's the case. So, I mean, it is obvious to me why that's the case. We've always done it this way. It's not a good enough reason, though, to do it this way, because if you look at the data, pitching with an extra day of rest is a more valuable arrow in your quiver than throwing 10 or 15 pitches fewer that day. Once you're hot, you're hot. In many cases, I mean, you played baseball through college. You know what it feels like to be in that moment. You'll worry about the rest later. I don't want to have to worry about making a decision because of what is going to happen 5 days from now. If I have 6 or 7 days from now to be able to get this guy's arm right for his next start, I'm fine if we let him empty his chamber and I would love to see more teams experiment with 6- and 7-man rotations, with obvious exceptions for those workhorses that we already discussed.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree.
It'd be really fun to see something good out of try.
Yeah, and the thing is too, it's like you don't always have your hot days. So it's like why you're wasting. I feel like you're wasting some of these pitchers' hot days when you pull them too early.
Right. So if I'm getting a gem from Brian Wu, we get through 6 innings, he's going to pitch again 4 days from now. If he was pitching again 5 days from now, let him throw 15 more pitches and win the game in front of us. Like, let's win this game, like the game that's happening.
Yeah,
the game that's happening right now that we're winning 3-1. I understand the notion of the long-term planning of it all and the managing the arm of it all, everything. I do. But in individual cases, which is something that analytics don't do well, and managers do and can do well, say with pitching coaches and people that are on the field in that moment, we can make decisions like that for the greater good in some cases. And if we're going to stretch him out today, you give him an extra day of rest, I think we can win on both sides. The candle can burn effectively on both ends.
So with that, kind of along that topic, why, with all the rest that we're giving the pitch count, we have, why are there more pitching injuries than there ever was before?
It's only going to be exacerbated as we continue to chase velocity, Dave. I mean, it's inevitable. It is now almost a certainty that if you're a pitcher that throws hard, you're going to get cut open. The numbers are staggering, the extent to which Tommy John and the surgeries of that kind. They obviously have other ways now that they do things to try and restrict or limit the amount of time that you can have to recover. So it's not 18 months necessarily, but the point remains the same. If you throw gas, if you throw smoke, if you throw fuzz, you're going to get cut open. And the reason that it's worth it for pitchers is because that's what's going to get me paid, because velocity works and that's what sells. And it's hard to dispute that notion. But at what risk? At what cost? If we're going to continue to ask pitchers to throw 100 when we know naturally they shouldn't be throwing 100, then you have to create these arm factories, for lack of a better term, and it's not really good for anyone. Like, it's not actually good for anyone involved. Like, we're chasing the thing that works, but at what extent? To what cost? And the only way to curb it, Dave, is going to be for Major League Baseball to step in, for professional baseball to step in and reward, for lack of a better term, your starting pitcher for going to a game. Like, that's the only way you can do it. Because if you're going to continue rolling the ball out the way that we do now and letting a kid go out there and throw 101 for 4 innings and inevitably get cut open in a few years, right? Then it's going to be this vicious cycle that only becomes more and more common, to such an extent that we're not going to really have any high volume starting pitchers, and we're not going to really have anybody with clean bill of health. And we're not going to have the command guys. We're going to have just stuff monsters. And that's the direction that we're going, unless, of course, Major League Baseball intervenes and can do so successfully.
I had a buddy that played pro ball, and he came over from Cuba, actually, and I used to ask him about, like, the arm injury stuff, and he said in Cuba it was common because they would do, a lot of the pitchers would do a lot of steroids, and he said your body is only meant to accelerate and decelerate so fast. Everyone's different, right? But some people were not built; their body was not built to throw 100 miles per hour. And he used to say some of the side effects of the steroids was it got you moving faster than your body was able to handle. That's why they would get injured so much. So yeah, you throw a lot harder and then you blow out your arm because your tendons and you weren't made for that. You weren't made for that. That was always his opinion. He always just say to me, I thought it was interesting. I want to say, so I don't know, with all the training that we do now, is our body just not meant to handle?
It's fascinating because the training is so good at maximizing output, but so bad at managing the body.
Right.
So you'd think that the technology that we have access to, and it's state of the art, I mean, it's rocket ship, that's crazy, would be able to tell a pitcher, this should be like the 90th percentile velocity that you can and should reach without exceeding it. So, for example, recently, Spencer Schwellenbach of the Braves, breakout season, 6-1 strikeout to walk rate, had become the Braves' actual ace. Had 12 strikeouts in a game against the Phillies, threw harder than he ever has, like 100, like sitting 100 at times. And this is a guy who was like a college position player like 3-4 years ago. Fractured his elbow, arm exploded, right? And he said afterwards, I think I was throwing too hard. But the incentive structure doesn't disincentivize that. Right. So why would he not sit 100 if he can sit 100?
Yeah. Mm.
It's almost unavoidable unless the incentive structure changes. And until it does, you can ask me that same question 10 years from now. Yeah, I tried the same one.
Yeah.
With more contemporary example.
Let's shift a little because you have some hot takes, some hot takes that I've known you for a while, so I know some hot takes that you have. One of them, I believe, is that Derek Jeter was one of the worst defensive shortstops in history. Is that still one of your takes?
It is still one of my takes. It is definitively not hot. It's not an opinion.
It's not an opinion.
It's a statement of fact. Derek Jeter was an abhorrent shortstop.
Can you unpack it?
Yeah. So he's very misremembered, despite the fact that he was the most seen baseball player of his generation. He's very misremembered. Derek Jeter is one of the greatest hitters of all time. Derek Jeter is one of the best base runners of all time. I mean, there aren't 24 players in the history of baseball that I would say definitively have that are more well-rounded offensive profile than Derek Jeter. I mean, there's like 5 guys in history with more hits than him. He stole 300 bases. He ran them efficiently. I mean, he was a phenomenal offensive player and a driving force behind his team winning 5 championships. He's definitively a top 50 player of all time. He is as clutch, literally, as anyone ever. And that's someone coming from someone that doesn't even really believe in all the abstract nature of clutch, but all you have to do is watch him play in the playoffs. All you have to do is look at his baseball reference page. He was a metronome in the playoffs. He was a brilliant hitter in the playoffs. But Derek Jeter was an abhorrent defender at shortstop. And this is not my opinion. It's a statement of fact. In fact, I would love to not have to be the guy that says these things every once in a while, because it so angers Yankees fans that have grown to adore him, and for good reason. But this is not something for which there is a good faith argument to the contrary. Derek Jeter was not a shortstop, and the case against him is airtight. So we only really have a super modern way of measuring infield defense since something like 2003. That was the implementation of defensive runs saved. It's a very sturdy metric that holds up very well, goes into everyone's WAR component now in determining how good or bad you were at playing defense. And it also, of course, adjusts based upon the position in which you played for your WAR. But in Derek Jeter's case, he only ever played shortstop. Before 2003, and going back literally as far as we've ever played baseball, there are very astute ways of measuring how good you were based upon chances that you had and put outs and assists that you accrued. So it's a little bit more rudimentary, but it's done in a standardized fashion across the history of baseball. So you're comparing apples to apples.
Pre-2003.
As intelligently as you can, truthfully. They're done excellently. And I say this as someone who has been somewhat skeptical of them in the past, but I can fairly definitively say that if you look at the leaderboards for the greatest defenders of all time before 2003, it's all the people that you would expect. It's Brooks Robinson and Ozzie Smith and Roberto Clemente and Mark Belanger and Willie Mays and Andruw Jones and people like that. I mean, it's those people. It's the people that you know are the greatest defenders ever. So if that's the case, why would it not be true also if you look at those same leaderboards and see the worst defenders ever on the same ones and conclude that the list is correct on both ends of the extreme? Derek Jeter's on those lists, definitively, on all those lists.
2003.
Even if you look at his numbers from 2003 on, which is when he was past his prime as a defender, they're terrible. They're absolutely wretched. Even if you look at his stuff from when he debuted through 2002 or from 2003 on, they tell the same story. Derek Jeter was a bad shortstop.
Explain the defensive run saved.
Defensive run saved is a number for which a fielder will be rewarded or penalized, credited or debited, with a player opportunity that he does or doesn't make. And it's very standardized across the board using both the tracking metrics and also a number of people doing video analysis that tag as many as 30 outputs on every single play for the last 22 years. It could not be more scientific. It could not be more airtight. So if you think WAR is a reasonable, worthwhile statistic, and you don't like defensive run saved, well, you have to choose one because it's so airtight now that teams use it in determining how much money a player should be paid. Defensive run saved is a very durable, excellent, tried and true metric to determine how good or bad a player was playing defense. And Derek Jeter very consistently grades very unfavorably, but you don't even necessarily have to just use one metric to prove it. So Baseball Reference has a slightly different outcome than Fangraphs, which has a slightly different outcome from Baseball Prospectus. So if you just look at each of those 3 companies that do this modeling that every single front office in baseball adheres to, that we use for how valuable a player was throughout the course of their careers, which winds up going into legitimate Hall of Fame arguments. We're talking about airtight stuff, truthfully. According to Baseball Reference, Derek Jeter cost his team something like 250 runs with his glove playing defense at shortstop. Fangraphs says that number is closer to 150. So they were a little bit kinder to Derek Jeter, but it's still a really loud, ugly number. And Baseball Prospectus says he cost his team like 300 runs. Derek Jeter, over the course of his career, cost his team something between 15 and 30 wins merely because he was his team's shortstop. Now, Derek Jeter more than outweighed all of that with his preposterous hitting and preposterous base running. Derek Jeter is one of the 24 greatest offensive performers, at least in recent history. He was a phenomenal offensive player. But Derek Jeter doesn't get credit, in my judgment, because of the numbers that I just spouted, for being one of the great shortstops of all time. Because he wasn't actually a shortstop, Dave. He just played there. And he just played there as unsuccessfully as any high-volume shortstop in the history of baseball. And some people would point to the fact that, look, it didn't prevent the Yankees from doing any winning because they won 5 championships during that time. But they stopped doing that winning at such a time when Derek Jeter fell off so much defensively that you can craft a good faith argument that he prevented them from doing more winning once you got to 2000 in a very articulate manner. Derek Jeter cost his team with his glove so many runs. And if you look at certain postseason series and decide to dig into it more granularly, it gets uglier and uglier as you look.
So is there an argument to be made that if you made that argument about that he cost them potentially some more World Series because of his defensive play at shortstop in the 2000s and beyond, right? With that argument, wouldn't the opposite side of that argument be true that because of his play at shortstop is they won the first 4 titles that they did win, and was pre the defense DRS can't be necessarily factored in. His error rate was obviously low. He was very, very low in those early years.
It's not horrible,
right?
It was a negative, but not unplayable.
Negative. Very consistent. Very consistent. I mean, his fielding percentage there was little variation to it.
Yeah, but that's a dumb
on it.
It's a test. The percentage is dumb as that.
Okay, explain why. Why does so, guys?
Because it takes into account things that we now know are much too finite to use it biblically.
Like range.
Range is the most important attribute that any infielder has, and it's not close. Derek Jeter had consistently good fielding percentages because he didn't get to anything. Passive Diving Jeter was the name of a blog, very hilariously. Derek Jeter made the routine play, and every once in a while, a flashy one. But Derek Jeter had about as limited a range as anyone that's ever played that position consistently. But parenthetically, Corey Posada, who caught for that team, and Bernie Williams played center for that team, also graded out very unfavorably. This is less a commentary on exactly what Derek Jeter was or wasn't doing on defense, and more commentary on how important defense actually is. I don't believe defense historically is necessarily appreciated for what it actually represents in terms of winning impact. It's even less important now than it was when Derek Jeter was playing. But the fact that they had a value negative catcher, shortstop, and center fielder on a dynasty, what does that tell us about how much defense actually matters? If you can bang, if you can have a 115 OPS plus as a team, if you can really pitch, if you're the best closer of all time, that matters a lot more than being able to catch it. Because chances obviously vacillate from team to team too. Across Major League Baseball right now, there are going to be something like 15,000 fewer chances for fielders to make this year than there were 20 years ago. 15,000. So that's 500 per team a season. That's 3 per game. So you watch a baseball game right now, there are going to be 3 fewer chances for your fielders than there would be 20 years ago, and multiply that by 162. Defense isn't as important as it used to be. It even used to not matter as much as we thought it did. The notion of the 5-tool player or the 5-tool team is a cool axiom, but it's not that impactful when it comes to winning baseball. The most impactful thing you can do on a baseball field is hit and pitch. The things that go beyond that, the ancillary skills, where you play matters, but how well you play it only matters insofar as you clearing a certain threshold or prerequisite to be able to stay there. Derek Jeter definitively did not clear it. He won 5 championships anyway. And so what Derek Jeter was able to do in his career, again, in the batter's box and on the base pass, unassailable. But the notion that he being a bad defender at shortstop is a hot take is definitively not true, because he just wasn't. Regardless of how you want to...
Genuine question. Sure, the defensive runs saved, that does account for the range, obviously, of not getting to balls, right? That's why it's such a kind of a cool stat. Yeah. Does it take into account getting to a ball, but then the probability of making an error once you get to a ball? Yes, it does. It takes that into account, because a lot of guys I put guys with some phenomenal range. Those guys tend to make more errors obviously, because they're getting to a ball that no one else would get to. They're getting the ball behind second base. They're doing a spin play, and then they're trying to make a throw, and they're throwing the ball away. And, with defense, obviously, it's a two-part play. So it's not only getting to the ball to make the catch. You have to make a throw. And 30 to 40% of errors, all errors are throws, right? So especially when you're at the maximum of your range, that probability goes up even more.
And you just demonstrated why fielding percentage doesn't matter. You just answered your own question because you just used the example.
Well, so here would be my point to that. Yeah, well, let's just say the throw part of the error, right? 40% actually of throwing errors result in the base runner advancing.
Gotcha.
Right? They advance that. So would there be an argument to be made that Derek Jeter not getting to base hits up the middle that maybe another player would get to, potentially making an error, and then 34% of those errors resulting in that player getting to second base is actually a positive?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. There is plenty of knowledge.
You're saying, though, I'm trying.
And you're asking the kinds of questions that Yankees fans have asked and making the points that Yankee fans have posited for 20 or 30 years. And if I were a fan of the Yankees, I would feel the exact same way that they do, and I'd be asking the same questions that you were asking. Because how do I square the circle of this guy is my favorite player ever? I saw him become Mr. November. I saw him make the jump throws and the running into the stands catch and all the things that Derek Jeter did so well, so legendarily. For this guy to tell me now retroactively that he actually stunk there. It's a very hard square to circle. The thing is, we have the ability now mathematically and using the nuance that those numbers provide us to be able to differentiate, to separate. Derek Jeter was otherworldly at certain things and just awful at others. And that's the way that we are in any walk of life or any capacity. No one's positing that Gary Sheffield was a good outfielder just because he was a good hitter. He's one of the worst outfielders ever. But in the case of Derek Jeter, because he was Derek Jeter, he has to be good at everything. It's just not true.
Right.
It's just not true. We should have the ability to recognize both of these things as being true contrary.
Well, an argument too, the jump throw is a lot of probably a result of the lack of range.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Why there's so many jump throws.
His iconic play, like his Jumpman, all right? Yeah. His Michael Jordan Jumpman is only a thing because he didn't get there because his right foot. And that's the thing that we're celebrating. So we should have the Jumpman logo with minus 250 defense rate to say, sorry, Derek. Sorry, Derek.
So, all right, that was good. I wanted to let you air that out.
Another non-standard opinion. This is one primarily based upon the countless hours I've actually spent at the Hall of Fame itself. So the most common arguments in favor of Pete Rose being inducted are emotional ones. The most persuasive arguments that argue they shouldn't be are logical ones. And the kind of brain that I have is obviously one that is going to be prone to favoring the latter, that logic trail, that train of thought. And the reason that I believe Pete Rose is definitively not a Hall of Famer is that he's not worthy of honor. We view the Baseball Hall of Fame as something for which it definitively is not. So there's a commonly held belief, mostly the people that have actually never been there once, that it is merely a baseball museum, that it is meant to chronicle the history of baseball. That's not true. At least it's not entirely true. If you go to the Baseball Hall of Fame and a museum, it effectively has two purposes it serves. They're connected, but it has two purposes it serves. The Baseball Hall of Fame and museum. You walk in those doors in Cooperstown, as I had so many times, and you walk to the left up the stairs and you enter the museum. And in that museum, you will read about Pete Rose and Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa and Shoeless Joe Jackson and Cap Anson and any number of other pariahs. Players whose baseball careers, while extraordinary on the field, were marred by their transgressions either on or off of them. Pete Rose is one of these players. You don't walk through the baseball museum up there in Cooperstown and see no mention of Pete Rose. He's all over the freaking place. Pete Rose's stamp on baseball history has been made and will remain until the end of time. But Pete Rose is not worthy of honor. When you walk into that plaque gallery, which is baseball's equivalent of their Holy of Holies, for lack of a better term, that's where you honor players worthy of honor, which is why he's not there. And he doesn't belong there because he's not worthy of honor, because he broke baseball's one cardinal rule. And he did so in the mid-'80s and lied about it to us for so many years. Pete Rose didn't just bet on baseball. He didn't just bet on his own team. He did. He told us he didn't, and he did. And we learned that in 2015 with an ESPN report when they were finally able to get a hold of his notebook. We have so much more information now about what he actually did, which runs contrary to what he said he did. And if Pete Rose wasn't guilty, he wouldn't have agreed in 1989 with the commissioner of baseball to the lifetime ban, and then spent the rest of his life arguing that he shouldn't have had such a thing attached to him. He agreed to it himself, and the reason he agreed to it himself is because he was guilty as sin. Pete Rose couldn't have been more guilty. He knew it, and now we all know it too. So you be the judge of whether or not that person is worthy of honor. That being said, Rob Manfred recently saying that he has been removed from the permanently ineligible list because he obviously has exhausted his lifetime ban.
Right.
It's an objective good move because it is now no longer the commissioner's office, and we can allow the voters to be the make that decision.
Do you think they'll vote him in?
I don't think they will ever vote him in.
Really?
But I'm glad that they're going to have the opportunity. My opinion is not germane to this at all. Let's let the people that vote on these things, these committees, decide whether or not he belongs in the whole thing. Like, who I believe should be the president is not important. Who I believe should be the pope is not important. My opinion is that he's not worthy of honor. But if 12 out of 16 people on a committee deem him to be baseball lifers, baseball experts, that he belongs to be in. And I will by no means think of the Hall of Fame as a lesser place. You ask me for my opinion. If I were on that committee, I would not vote him in. But if Pete Rose has a plaque in that gallery someday, I'll go. I'll take a picture with it. I'll enjoy it. And the Baseball Hall of Fame would definitively not be a lesser place. If you ask me, my personal opinion, is he worthy of honor? Absolutely not.
So you said he broke the one cardinal sin. So steroids not on the cardinal sin. So do you believe those that use steroids should be in the Hall of Fame?
It's a very, very complicated question because betting on baseball is so black and white. The use of steroids in that era is very much gray. And you know that as well as I do. Baseball steroid era really runs for about 20 years, something like 1986 to 2005. That's when the joint drug agreement ended and restarted, basically. That was the Wild Wild West, as you well know. So looping all steroid guys into the same bucket and treating them the same is simply unfair to each individual, because Roger Clemens' steroid use is very different than what Barry Bonds' looked like, and Mark McGwire's, and Sammy Sosa's, and any number of other players that we either know use or we suspect used. And it's a very slippery slope when we decide to loop everyone in under the same umbrella, because not everyone belongs under the same umbrella. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of Barry Bonds, who I think is probably the best proxy for this discussion. Barry Bonds, by the time we had reached 1998, could have dropped dead and been the first ballot Hall of Fame. Probably the best all-around player, if not in the history of baseball, certainly since Willie Mays, his godfather. And at that time, Barry Bonds, a 400, like 100 WAR player, watches Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, both of whom are juiced out of their minds, captivate the nation with their home run chase in 1998, and not have to pay any price for the fact that it looked awfully weird. I mean, Mark McGwire had androstenedione Dione in his locker, and a reporter who flagged it was roundly mopped around the country as being someone who was stepping on toes he shouldn't have. It was roundly agreed upon at the time, from the commissioner's office all the way down to the reporters to the players. This was the world in which we were living. This was the Wild Wild West. And we celebrated McGwire and Sosa at the time. And they brought that back baseball after the strike, just like Howard can do with his consecutive game streak, of course. Barry Bonds is watching this. They're not testing for steroids. He's 3 times the player that either of them are combined. And he says to himself, okay, the incentive structure says that if I hit 70 home runs, I will be lauded the way that these guys are. So he hit 73. He did so abnormally. He did so unnaturally. And we now know that, obviously. But Barry Bonds was doing something that was fairly commonplace at the time. And to disincentivize him retroactively and to penalize him retroactively when there are certainly guys that we are fairly certain have used steroids that are already in the Hall of Fame, to penalize him for just being so much better at baseball than they were, strikes me as being pretty bad words.
So you prefer that he is in the Hall?
Bonds and Clemens are in, but no one else is for me.
Real?
Because those guys were demonstrably greater than anybody else. Roger Clemens is probably the best pitcher since Walter Johnson. Barry Bonds is probably the best hitter since Ted Williams. The best all-around player since Willie Mays. Those guys weren't product of steroids. Those guys were Hall of Famers before they ever used steroids. And the reason they used steroids was because their contemporaries were, and they were being rewarded for it. It's difficult for me now to judge them for making the same decisions that their peers were making.
So, but without the testing, not knowing who was taken, so in that era, are you just saying that no one else should get in the Hall of Fame during that era?
I'm saying that you have to use your discernment based on everyone's likely usage, and that's so hard. Like Mike McGuire has has a Hall of Fame resume, in my judgment, because of his steroids. That's my personal opinion. The same can be said about Sammy Sosa. The same can be said about, candidly, any number of other guys who have or haven't been linked to those issues. But at the same time, Bonds and Clemens were Hall of Famers before they started using steroids, or we suspect they started using steroids. And they were doing those at a time in which there was no testing, and the incentive structure told you to do it. And so that's the hard square for me to circle. Those guys were demonstrably greater and different than all the others who were doing it at the same time.
Yeah. Well, that assumes, because a lot of these guys didn't get actually officially caught doing it because there wasn't any testing.
But here's the thing.
Like a Frank Thomas.
Frank Thomas, I think, is likely as clean as a baby's bottom.
Right. I agree, but that's our assumption.
But all we can do is operate with the information that we have, Dave.
Right.
And that's why using the steroid guys term is something that I loathe and will refuse to do.
Right. Yeah.
By the way, Frank Thomas, underrated player, 100%. Phenomenal right-handed hitter. Arguably the best one that we had from Joe DiMaggio all the way into the mid-90s.
Yeah. I wasn't saying that as a knock on him, because I don't believe, I agree with you. I think he was clean. But my point is that they're all just our opinions, right? It's just about the eye test, right? And that could be difficult for, it's not a fair judge.
It's not a fair judge, but we're human beings we watch these things happen in real time. We saw the way that these guys' bodies changed. We saw the way that the steroid issue impacted baseball. We lived it.
What about, you said Clemens and Bonds are the only two. What about A-Rod?
I'm a no on A-Rod. I'm a no on Manny, because those guys tested positive. To me, you have to draw a very clear distinction after we started testing.
Okay.
And that to me is the ultimate.
If Bonds and, because they tested positive later in their career.
Bonds and Clemens, so neither of them had one positive test.
No, I know, but I'm saying A-Rod tested later in his career positive, and so did Manny. So why
twice in many cases?
Yeah, no, I understand that. But if and A-Rod did have a body type that looked from the eye test would appear that maybe he was taken in earlier on in his career and had phenomenal.
Later, and then doing it in Texas.
Oh, he did.
That wasn't a positive test. He later admitted to doing retroactive. So I actually respect it.
So if Bonds and Clemens ever did test positive, you say, so positive test, out.
Correct. Because that's you cheating when you know the rules are in place to prevent the exact thing. Whereas before the speed limits were in place, Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds were just going so much faster than everybody else because they were so much better than everybody else. Their car moved so much faster than all of their contemporaries. And that's the difference between those guys and basically anyone else that you want to loop into the steroid guys bucket. But you do, I think, have to definitively draw that line at the testing era.
Yeah. Well, I guess my opinion, I think Boyer and Sosa should be in. Yeah. So I'm off mindset of that era because it was the wild, wild west. And you don't know who was not taking it and who was, because the testing wasn't there. I believe you got to take it as that was the era.
But if you had to bet whether or not McGuire or Sosa used PEDs, what would you bet?
Oh, I bet they took it. But I also I guess I have to look at who else was in the Hall of Fame inducted or in the Hall of Fame during that era, right? Because you'd have to bet on those as well. But that was just the era. That's what a lot of people, we don't know who was not doing it during that time. So I think you just got to take the stats the way the stats were.
The natural kickback, though, is think about all the players that were clean that aren't in because the numbers were so inflated.
It's true.
Putting McGuire and Sosa in, the argument could very cogently be made. It's unfair to the players that they're, for lack of a better term, keeping out.
Yeah. I guess I would rather have the players in. I don't know. I'd rather have the players that did do the stats that had to put up the numbers in because that's what a lot of them were doing. We don't know how many of them were doing.
And a lot of history would be the
and this was the era. This was their era, and to kind of take it where it goes back with my assault. You know what I mean? This is what it is. What it is.
It goes back to my museum versus gallery distinction. McGuire and Sosa are littered in the Hall of Museum.
Yeah,
but they don't have a bust there next to it. That is the way to Greg Maddox and all the guys.
No, it is tough because again, were a lot of guys that were clean, and I'm sure they were incredibly betrayed by the recognition that the guys got that worked.
They should have smoked it up.
It's a tough one to grapple with, just because it's like we all bet the game grew, and now we're like, no.
So you're thinking like September 1998. You're turning on SportsCenter every morning to see if McGuire or Sosa hit the homer.
Yeah.
Imagine in that moment saying to yourself, these guys aren't going to be in the Hall of Fame someday.
Crazy.
It would be an impossible circle to square.
Yeah.
But that's where we've gotten, and there's so much blame to go around, and it's a topic that we'll very likely debate until the end.
So Ortiz, you agree with being it?
David Ortiz definitively should be a Hall of Famer. He's on these leaked lists and guys of that nature. He is, in my judgment, if not the best DH ever, among the top 3 to 5, and is one of the great postseason performers in the history of baseball. His World Series stats are beyond belief. He transformed that position, and his connection to PEDs to me is loose enough to where he definitively belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so I got a Chat GPT question. Chat GPT did most overrated, top 10 overrated ball players of all time, or not of all time, since 2000.
The top 10 most overrated players.
I'm gonna read them flat years. I'll read them to you,
okay.
And I want to see what your
okay. Got reaction?
Is. Yeah, you got it. Number 1 is Alex Rodriguez. Number 2 is Jason Hayward. 3, Tim Lincecum. 4, David Eckstein. 5, Josh Hamilton. 6, Mark Pryor. 7, Andrew Jones. 8, Nomar Garciaparra. 9, Eric Gagne. And I got cut off, but that's not.
Top 9 most overrated players since 2000. Yes. This is like a Mad Lib.
Yeah.
None of those guys have anything in common. I'm offended by the Chat GPT when it's spit out at you. The reason why the list should be read or moved and not take it seriously at all is the fact that Andrew Jones is on it.
Yeah.
Andrew Jones is the best center fielder ever. Ever. Andrew Jones, using the same defensive metrics and measures of evaluation that we talked about with Jeter, is on lists with Willie Mays and Paul Blair and the greatest outfielders of all time with less volume, considering he was really only an everyday player through his 20s. But that's a guy who hit 400 home runs, and he was inarguably a top 5 center fielder ever defensively, and arguably the best one ever. Andrew Jones is as big a reason why the Braves had this division dynasty as literally anyone else they had, inclusive of Chipper and Maddox and Smoltz and Glavine and Javi Lopez and anyone else you want to put forth. Andrew Jones is probably among the top 10 most underrated players in the history of baseball, so he certainly should be on a list. And he certainly should be here for now 3.
Overrated.
The most overrated player.
What does those say in the last 25 years?
Well, we already did go.
Yeah, you can go after.
Yeah, we already discussed my thoughts on Jeter, but I don't think he's actually overrated as much as he is misremembered.
Right. So how good was it as a hitter?
So I think when I think of overrated players now, I think of players who had high WAR values that I think disproportionately weighed things that don't much matter. That's not a great way of articulating that, but in short, how did that guy have so much WAR? I don't remember him being that good. Those types of players. So Jason Hayward on that list is a very good example because Jason Hayward is boosted exorbitantly from the perspective of his WAR by playing outstanding right field defense, which I've already articulated, I don't think matters that much. He couldn't really hit at all. It's a league average hitter for over the course of like 15 years and accrued a lot of WAR because he played right field at a consistently high level. And to me, like the levers that WAR is pulling there for him overestimate how much that matters. Another good example I'll provide you with Ben Zobrist, who was a good all-around player, played a bunch of positions well, had some good hitting seasons, a 2016 hero with the Cubs, but it's another guy who accrued ridiculous amounts of WAR in large part because of the defensive value that he generated by being average or better at a few different positions, which a manager might tell you is really important. But from the perspective of remembering a player's career and how much value they produced, the idea that he was 3 times more valuable than Ryan Howard, who hit 300-something home runs and was an absolute force in the middle of the Phillies lineup, but had low WAR total because he didn't do anything except hit for power, is a tough pill for me to swallow. And so if you're looking for like the most overrated and underrated players historically, that's what I typically do. What does WAR tell me they were worth? And how differently does that feel from what we watched and felt like at the time of their careers?
And that's good. That's a good answer. Now, you did a lot of lists, obviously, with the 2 books that you have out, and then the 3rd coming out soon. The Guy Your Number Got Your Answers. Was there any list that you and Greeny like really disagreed on? What were some of the most argued parts of those lists?
I'm so glad that you asked that because it's gonna apply perfectly to this discussion specifically. God's honest truth is that we did something like 90 lists in a completely collaborative fashion, for which we didn't have that much dispute or disagreement because I presented the facts, and by and large, we worked inside the 20-yard lines to reach our conclusions. There's like 4 or 5 lists that he did by himself, like Cree's favorite X, Y, or Z. There's 4 or 5 lists that I did by myself, X, Y, or Z. So that gets us to 98. The only chapter that we did the same list of twice is the all-time dream baseball line. And the reason we did that is because we didn't have hardly any overlap at all.
No overlap.
And so we said to ourselves, well, this needs to be 2 different chapters because he approaches the game beautifully. He approaches the game of baseball very much from the perspective of its artistry. It's genius from the perspective of this is how I remember these guys growing up. Which players have thrilled the masses? Which players have impacted baseball holistically and globally? Which players have left an indelible mark based on a record that they have achieved? And I think about baseball in terms of like a zero-sum value produced, generated, like optimizing efficiency and things of that nature. I mean, I obviously very much enjoy the beauty of baseball, but if I'm building a lineup, I want to outscore you, right? And so when you go through his list, he has, the Johnny Benches of the world and Sandy Koufax and some of the more traditional players who in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which is when he was coming to age as a baseball fan, were all-time greats and considered such at the time. Whereas I scoured 150 years of baseball history. I've got Barry Bonds as my leadoff hitter. So that therein tells you like the difference between how he views baseball, how I see baseball, and the fact that we so strongly disagreed on how to build a lineup. We basically had to build 2 different ones because I did mine to maximize run scoring output, and he wanted to see these 9 guys in a lineup together, and both of us are right, and that's the beauty of baseball.
That's so cool. Now the numbers book, which was your first one, was there any numbers that you would go back on and change now?
Yes, there are. There are a few that I do think we got wrong, or at least would change now with the benefit of hindsight. I'll give you 3. I'll give you 4. The number 8, we gave, number 8 I would give to Alexander Ovechkin now. Gave to Kobe Bryant, who wore number 8 for half of his career. Ovechkin's the all-time leading scorer in the history of hockey. That's happened since we put the book out. He should definitively be that. We gave John Elway number 7 instead of Mickey Mantle, which I think was a miss. We gave Tim Tebow, the college player, number 15, since Patrick Mahomes has been to like 3 Super Bowls. So that's an obvious miss. And we gave Gronk number 87 instead of Sidney Crosby. I think definitively Sidney Crosby's a greater hockey player than Gronk was a football player, considering the scope and magnitude of their careers. So those are 4 that come to the top of mind, and maybe someday we'll do one in which we sort of fix, maybe a half a dozen to a dozen, or when the facts change, I change them.
I'm 17.
John Havlicek was 17.
So Ohtani 17. Would you change that?
Already, I would, yeah.
Yeah.
Ohtani is the best baseball player ever. I don't know that he'll play long enough or play two-way well enough or long enough to have done things like Babe Ruth did, because he's certainly not the hitter that Babe Ruth was. Even Ohtani at his apex can't approximate what Babe Ruth was in the early 20s. But he's the best player ever. I mean, no one has done this. Babe Ruth said himself, no one can play 2 ways successfully for this long and do it successfully. And Ohtani hasn't just done it, but he's gotten his elbow ripped up and is doing it again now. And for him to be the 2nd best hitter on earth behind Aaron Judge, and to be that over the course of 5 years, and be someone who led his league in pitching stats as a qualifier multiple times, is absolutely unheard of. Dave, you'd well know, because you've coached for so many years, how preposterous it is to do that. You're not allowed to specialize. Like, you're specialized in middle school and high school. College coaches won't let you do both. Ohtani's doing it on the Dodgers now. Ohtani's the best hitter the Dodgers have probably ever had. And there's going to be a season that he strikes out 200 batters again. He's the best player ever. He's an Inner Circle Hall of Famer if he died tomorrow, God forbid. He is impossible to believe. He's a miracle that we should appreciate every time he steps foot on that field, whether it's the mound or in the batter's box.
Yeah.
He's the best player ever.
Yeah. Well, definitely when I saw it, I didn't see 17 but it was before. I think it was before his time.
It was before he became him.
Who he is, yeah.
This was like a project primarily put together in 2020 and 2021.
Okay. I don't think I remember seeing 50. Well, 51 was Randy Johnson. Who did you have 51? You remember?
51. So Randy Johnson was one of the finalists for 51. Once you get to the 50s, it's kind of challenging because there's a lot of football photos.
All guys, I know.
We gave 51 to Dick Butkus. Dick Butkus is, if not the best linebacker in the history of pro football, he's certainly up there. And as a Chicago person, Greeny is a Chicago person, lived there, worked there for many, many years. He recognized the importance of Dick Butkus in the Chicago sports scene and his legend to the Chicago Bears. And for as good as Randy Johnson and Ichiro, and
I was just saying, yeah,
we wound up giving 51 to Dick Butkus. The football guys get a little bit heavier in the book as you go along because they were the higher numbers, as you well know.
Yeah. Who would you say is the best pitcher in the game right now?
I think very challenging question right this second because there are three guys that can make a very credible, full-throated argument. In no particular order, before I reveal the definitive answer to this question, Tarik Skubal is probably the most popular answer to the question right now if you asked 100 fans. Paul Skeens would probably be the second most popular answer if you survey those same 100 people. And Zach Wheeler will probably be third. The key for Skubal is he's definitively the best lefty. His strikeout-to-walk numbers are preposterous, and he's doing it with high volume now. In the case of Skeens, it's the most unique pitch mix in the game. It's 5 or 6 pitches, moving horizontally in ways that hitters just can't touch with extremely low ERAs and extremely low whips. And the argument for Zach Wheeler is a more body of work, lifetime achievement type award. And that's why I think the answer to this question is still Zach Wheeler. Because the way that I think about the question that you just asked me, who is the best pitcher in baseball? I view it kind of like the question, well, who's the best heavyweight boxer in the world? In order to be named the best heavyweight boxer in the world, you have to become the lineal champ to do so. Zach Wheeler's still the lineal champ. He's not given it up, nor has Paul Skeens nor Tarik Skubal pitched so much greater than he over the last few seasons that they would have overtaken him. Zach Wheeler has been the best pitcher in baseball since 2020. He continues to get better. It's high volume, high efficiency in a hitter-friendly ballpark, and he continues to get better. While those guys are newer, and while the best thing you can be is new, and the worst thing that you can be is old and boring and understated as Zach Wheeler is, I think that the most important thing that you can be right now in baseball is an out-getter, as many as possible. Zach Wheeler consistently provides high volume with low ERA outputs, low whips, all the measures by which you can definitively say he's one of the most efficient pitchers in baseball, and he's done it for 5+ years now. And so if you ask me for okay, to start a game tomorrow, who are you taking? I'm not taking Wheeler. I'm taking Skubal or Skeens. But it's not an appropriate question because that's an abstract thing that will never actually happen. What makes Zach Wheeler such a great pitcher, and in my opinion, the best one in baseball right now, is the fact that he's been so good for so long, and it's harder to be so good for so long than it is to be great for a 2 or 3 year period of time.
How good do you think Paul Skeens is going to be?
I think he's a Hall of Famer. Paul Skeens is a Hall of Famer. If he can manage to throw 2,000 innings in his career, he'll give a speech in Cooperstown. The stuff is impossible to believe. The pitchability is so advanced. His understanding of his body and his pitch shapes are like someone that you expect to be 35 years old.
Give me a good comp of him. Is there a comp?
So candidly, he's a lot more like Maddox than he is Scherzer or Verlander or one of these power guys because of the way that he shapes the baseball horizontally. He's not going to ever have 300 strikeouts in a season. But his ERAs are all going to be low. His whips are always going to be low because he's going to keep the baseball off the barrel so consistently well. And because he does that and he pitches to effective weak contact, he's going to be able to rack up high inning total. And that's why I think if you imagine Greg Maddux being all puffed up with his turbo sinker and his splinter and all these different things that Skeens has, it's going to look a little bit more like that because you're going to be surprised that he doesn't have these gaudy strikeout totals the way that Scherzer and Verlander do and did. But it's going to be an ERA plus. It's going to be a run prevention profile that looks more like Clayton Kershaw, who just got to 3,000 strikeouts, and you don't even think of him as a strikeout artist. Yeah. That's the genius of Paul Skeens, and that's why I think he could someday be all of it.
Look what he's going through with the Pirates. For some reason, it just reminds me of DeGrom with the Mets. I mean,
there's a light for
there was a couple of years there where DeGrom was just like
every fifth day, good DeGrom, bad Pirate stats every fifth day on your Twitter timeline. It's a very similar notion. Yeah. And the Pirates have definitively not done a good enough job at surrounding him with the requisite talent. And I desperately hope that they do someday because there's no fan base that deserves it more, and there's no pitcher that I'd rather see climbing a mound in a playoff context than Paul Skeens.
Oh my God.
It would be absolutely electric. Absolutely electric.
Now, you're a Phillies guy. What about there's read that Trey Turner did not make the All-Star team?
Trey Turner did not make the All-Star team.
You good with that?
I'm not good with that. I thought he deserved to make it over Ellie De La Cruz. People primarily on the internet know me as the guy that thinks Trey Turner should move off of shortstop because he's not good at it. Now, he's been better defensively this year than he was in the previous two, although he booted a pretty ugly grounder last night that prevented the Phillies from turning a double play and cost Christopher Sanchez a run, but who's counting? Trey Turner is an outstanding hitter. and is an underappreciated hitter in today's game because he's not one of these power punchers. But to hit 300 in today's run-scoring environment is very challenging. With an on-base percentage in the mid-350s, he might scratch to 200 hits, which in today's game is very challenging to do. And right now, it's average defense at shortstop and plus base running, if not plus. And so I thought he deserved to be instead of Ellie De La Cruz in the National League, because I think the well-roundedness of Trey's offensive profile exceeds that of Ellie De La Cruz, and neither guy is especially good with the glove right now. So it's not an egregious omission, but I do think Trey Turner deserved it over Ellie.
This is one of the last couple ones, but would give me a World Series prediction.
So the best team in the American League right now, I think, is the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers are the best team, and the Astros probably have a little bit more helium because right now Yordan Alvarez is out, and if he comes back and recovers from this hand injury successfully, you're going to see him with a 170 OPS plus hitting nukes from pole to pole. He's one of my favorite hitters in baseball. And they're doing all this without him. They're hot. But the Tigers are not only the best team right now, but they also have the most opportunity for growth at the deadline because, as you well know, that's a really good system. Like, their minor leagues right now, they're churning out studs. Kevin McGonigal, I think, is going to be the #1 prospect in baseball by the end of the year once Roman Anthony graduates. Bryce Rader's an excellent shortstop prospect, and those guys are their future up the middle. They have other ancillary pieces, aside from guys in their top 100, that they can move for impactful pieces at the deadline. So not only are they the best team, they have a lot of opportunity for mobility. And so it's hard to see anyone else winning the American League right now. Because the postseason started tomorrow, I'd pick them. And obviously, Scooble every 5th day is just cinema.
Yeah.
In the National League, it's much more wide open, but it's also a much better league. I would take the Phillies if the postseason started tomorrow, but I do think it's so wide open that I could imagine the Cubs doing it. I can imagine the Mets doing it. I can imagine the Dodgers doing it. And there could be any number of teams that get hot over the next 2 months that rain on my parade there too. The Phillies had the best pitching staff. And despite the fact that I think you need a lineup to bang, to win 3 playoff series, as the Dodgers and Yankees demonstrated last year, the Phillies starting pitching is so consistently good. And they're going to be able to move some of those pieces to the bullpen and outpitch everybody. It's only an average lineup right now, which is why I think the Cubs are their biggest threat. And the Dodgers, once they get their arms back, could represent an even bigger one. But to me, the Phillies have such a high floor because of the pitching. And right now, if the postseason started tomorrow, I would take Tigers-Phillies because the Tigers have so much upward mobility and because the Phillies have the best pitching staff.
With who winning?
The Tigers.
Tigers
are going to win the World Series this year.
That's the call.
That's my call because they'll get better at the deadline. They have done so much right from the perspective of their infrastructure that they're maximizing player output at the big league level. Look at what Baez is doing this year. Look at what Torque is doing this year. Look what Gleyber Torres is doing this year. If you get a bunch of guys having career years, like, these guys are just an avalanche rolling downhill. I don't see a team in the American League that's going to stop them. And so they have a clearer path to getting to the World Series than anyone else does.
They have a great coaching staff.
A great coaching staff and a low-key awesome manager.
Yeah.
A.J. Hinch is really good at that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you've been good at the job for a while.
For multiple teams. Yeah, he's excellent. He's an excellent manager. Don't tell their R&D guys.
Well, let's. I want to wrap it up, but normally what I give the guests an opportunity to do is just kind of close with, some sort of piece of advice. We got a lot of, we got parents that watch this, we got coaches that watch this, and we talk a lot of stats, we talk a lot of data analytics stuff today, a lot of Major League Baseball stuff, But I guess what kind of is there any piece of advice you give to anyone that watched this that we want to leave them with?
Baseball will give back to you 10 times more than you give to it. When I first picked up a baseball bat when I was who knows how many months old, and when I first came of age as a baseball fan, watching Cal Ripken achieve his 2,131st consecutive game, that's the thing that really gripped me into baseball. I would have never imagined anything that could have ever come after that to be this great. I have a career that is centered on sports in which I can do all sorts of awesome things surrounded by baseball. I got to play baseball all the way up through college with you and many other people that I stay in touch with, which was obviously the thrill of a lifetime. And to enjoy it night to night. It's the kind of thing that gives back to you so much more than you can ever give it. And to love baseball is one of the greatest companions that you could ever have. Whether you're single and like watching it casually, or whether you're like me and me that have such busy lives with families, in whatever capacity, baseball encounters your timeline, encounters your life, encounters anything that you do in any walk of life. It is a wonderful thing that can add on and be the kind of thing that you pass down from generation to generation. Baseball has changed your life like it's changed mine. And so it serves no other purpose but to be enjoyed, as I said 2 hours ago, and I'll continue to enjoy it for as long as I live. And it is the greatest companion that you can ever have. So if you give baseball an inch, it will take a mile from you, and you'll be happy every single step of the way. So that's a super abstract piece of advice.
I love that, though.
But I just love this game.
I love that.
I love this game. I love talking ball with you.
Brother, man, I appreciate your comment. That was awesome. Well, hey, if you made it this far on the podcast, we appreciate it.
God bless.
And don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, God bless.
Thank you so much for watching this full podcast. If you'd like to watch more content with this guest, feel free to click right here. And if you want to watch another one of our podcasts, click right here.